Today I'm joined by Allison Lee. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the show. So nice to meet you.
Hi, Meg. Thanks for having me.
Before we get really diving into what it is that you do and how you help people, I'm just curious. I mean, you have a young daughter. She's 2.5. What's top of mind for you these days? What's happening in your world that's taking up space?
The main thing is really how do I balance whatever balance means, right? Create a lot of time and space for all the things that I find important and not feeling guilty about it. Like, I want to spend time with my
Mm.
kid. I want to work on my two businesses. I want to spend time with my family, my friends, exercise, all the things, right? So I think I've been mindful on how I talk to myself when I'm doing things or like multitasking. Like yesterday, I posted on my Instagram that I was on this coaching call because I love to learn from people and want to
Okay.
always constantly improve. And she was on my lap, she was working next to me drawing. And
Mm.
I had to be okay with like, I wasn't fully always like paying attention to the call. I wasn't always fully paying attention to her, but it was not something where I needed to like truly have an undivided attention to both. I could watch the replay. I could like decide
Mhm.
to spend time with her if I wanted and not feel guilty about that. So just kind of knowing that things might take me slower and, not really talking negatively to myself about how fast I'm moving or what I'm doing or not doing, and knowing that I'm very intentional with my time.
So how did you find that grace to give yourself that permission to take it, be soft on yourself? Because as women, that's one of the hardest things I find.
Yes, and it's still a work in progress as always, right? Because new things
Mhm.
always come up in life.
Yeah.
But the self-compassion work, right? And really recognizing that I only have so many abilities, time, and it doesn't mean anything about me if I'm struggling or if I'm needing to prioritize certain things over others, because I know how to prioritize and make sure that the urgent things are taken care of, right? Like I was talking about the replay. I could watch the replay if I really needed to,
Mhm.
but I like the live content, right? So I had to just really realize that, like, well, if I can't focus on this fully now, or I can't get to this now, when can I get to it later? And not make it
Mhm.
mean like I'm a bad person, right? Going into this all or nothing
Yeah.
thinking is what a lot of my clients do. Of, if I don't do this, I'm a bad person, which, I mean, no, we're not.
I love that. It's true. And finding that balance is so hard for us, right, as women, and just wanting, because we do want to be able to um, like check off all the boxes and be able to do it all. And I love that you're saying it's that, no, you know what? I think you can do it all. It's, you just have to give yourself a comma or an and, a pause to be like, okay, what can I do at this moment? It's just all comes in pieces. I always said, um, for my generation, you're much younger than I am, but for my 50s, for a lot of us women, we sort of were dictated or challenged to believe that, not even challenged, we were led to believe that it was a this or that. Like you had to choose one or the other. And what I love about the younger generation is like you guys are realizing what it's taken me a long time to figure out. There's like, oh no, it's and. But the and comes with some pauses sometimes to say, okay, right now this is all I can give. So that's really great that you know this about yourself.
For anyone who is aware of that, and for me personally at least, it's still something I need to remind myself of, because the noise outside expectations of should, or I have to do it all, or like you're saying, making this choice, and that's like the ultimate choice. It's real, that voice and the noise is real. So we do have to like check in with ourselves a lot and really examine what we're thinking.
So I'm curious. I know how I handle that voice, that gremlin, that inner critic. How do you handle her?
I hear what I'm saying, and I have to like take a breath and be like, well, is that true? Is this true right now?
Mm.
Right? Like, and just approach it from curiosity and ask myself these questions of like, well, what about it is true? And really tease out the parts that are true. And again, not being very careful of that all or nothing kind of thinking or self-talk of like, well, if I don't help my mom with, her phone, then I am a bad daughter. It's like, well, I can't help her with her phone right now, but I do all, and I do
Uh,
all these other things to help her in other times, and I will get to it. It's just not at this moment. So
yeah.
it's like that, having that pause first and really examining, is this a true thought for forever for all situations, which usually it's not.
And by the way, how often is your inner critic just lying to you, truthfully?
Probably more than I realize. Because
Yeah.
also, like, it's human nature to point out the negatives too and not acknowledge ourselves and give ourselves the positive praise or acknowledgement of what we have done. So it's like a default too. So it takes extra effort to really fully examine the whole picture as it is and then see both sides, right? The negative and the positive, as opposed to just the negative.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm a mental health therapist. I am licensed here in California, and I work with adults with immigrant parents, so second generation adults. I've been licensed now for 6+ years, and I also am the founder of Unshaken Gens, my coaching program. And that's also to help adults with immigrant parents.
What made you want to get into therapy and helping people?
Yeah, I actually stumbled upon it because upon graduating high school, I thought I wanted to be a journalist because I was always very curious. I was in newspaper and, loved writing and reading. But I really stumbled upon sociology and like fell in love with it. And I always knew that I wanted to give back to my community because since I was a second gen, right? My parents were immigrants. I really relied on a lot of resources from the school to help me like see what was available beyond what I knew, right? Which was a little limited because my parents, again, migrated over. So they don't really know what like opportunities were available for them sometimes, let alone us. So the school system really helped me, dream bigger and like be able to go to college and travel and all this stuff. So I always wanted to give back, but I thought it was giving back in a way of like informing people through journalism. But when I got my sociology classes, like I fell in love with just like the people, knowing about the bigger picture and all of that. So I just loved it. And then I went to grad school for therapy. And I started off serving families who were Vietnamese as well, because I speak Vietnamese. So it just fell together because I always knew that this was something that was really near and dear to me and I wanted to give back.
I mean, can you paint a picture for someone who doesn't understand what it means to be a second gen, like a child of an immigrant? And you're saying like your parents were literally off the boat in that sense. What is that like for you as a kid navigating through that?
Yeah, so my parents came over here before they had me and my sister. So they came over separately, actually. So my dad actually did come by boat. My mom flew over. They somehow met. And if you think about language, right, even people have conflict all the time and just when they're speaking English. There's misunderstanding, there's conflict. And they spoke Vietnamese, they spoke Chu Chao, this other Chinese dialect. And they had to really adapt to everyone speaking English, right? That's such a big barrier already. They left their home where they felt comfortable, they knew everything, they knew everyone around them. So there's this isolation, there's this trauma piece, generational like changes that are happening and conflict between their parents and them too, because then they're trying to adapt and their parents are probably even more, rigid in their ways because they grew up longer in another country. So just that alone, like there's so much conflict, dynamic challenges, cultural like expectations and conflict that comes up, let alone the fear of like, how do I speak to people about what I want? Right. And then when I came in the picture, I knew English. I got to go to school because I was born here. I had to be that little, like my sister and I were the middle person for them. And a lot of the roles and responsibilities naturally falls on us to help them with that. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility, and a lot of like honor and, gratefulness to be able to help out. But it's like, a double-edged sword, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. And I also my parents spoke perfect English when we moved to this country. I'm from Honduras, but I do remember I was taking ESL classes because English is my second language. And so I became friends with a lot of other kids from different countries. And it was much easier for me to transition because my parents spoke English. And while we didn't, they did. So that was actually easier. A lot of my friends that I met through the program, if you will, as they got better learning English, their parents did not know the language, so they became their everything. And for a young person who's just trying to be a child and trying to be quote unquote normal or blend in, and then having to navigate through communication with the teachers and communication with the, with the banks and like the grocery stores and that's a huge burden for children to carry. And it creates, to your point, a lot of these cultures, not only is it a sense of obligation, but also there's a resentment that also brews underneath it. Do you
Yeah.
find
And
that with some young adults who've had to be like that were in your shoes?
I do, and it's really unfortunate too because the resentment is like easily put on like the parents not knowing things, but also if you think about the bigger picture, how much is, systems and things set up to help immigrants or people who don't know English or whatnot succeed too, right? There's very limited resources in that. Like nowadays, it's a little bit better where I think schools make sure they have a translator, but when I went to school, the kids help translate. Like, how do you translate to your parents that I got a bad grade because of this, like
Right.
that? It's just terrible. So the system's also really kind of enforce that.
I love that now you're helping. You've made it a business to helping. So how does that look like on a take me to an actual practicality about it all. Who is your ideal client?
So my ideal clients are, adults with immigrant parents who are kind of set in their careers. They've already started being in their professional careers and they're wanting to, advance in their careers or start having a family, and they're really having a hard time balancing, right? Like we talked about whatever balance looks like for them. All the responsibility that they have, and they feel really guilty in not doing this, not doing that, not caring for their parents, not taking care of themselves, or not advancing in their careers. And they feel kind of like overwhelmed by all the things they want to do, but they don't feel like they're capable of doing it, or feel like so stressed that they don't know where to start, and they feel kind of burnt out because they've gotten so used to doing everything for everyone, and it's really hard for them to take care of themselves and really put themselves first. And again, it doesn't have to be like put themselves first all the time, but how do we rotate some of these priorities in? And they're having a hard time with that, but they're really educated and they really are driven, but their independence and their desire to do things by themselves so much is also impeding them in being able to succeed in all the areas they want.
I imagine the biggest culprit is the expectations of the parents, because the parents do, because it's such a generational thing, and in different cultures it's such a sign of respect. The elders expect the young people to step up in ways that I don't see it so much in the American, in our culture here in the US.
And it's really interesting because there's this framework I have called the repay cycle, and the awareness of the obligation and the duty to take care of parents and family. There's two ways it comes across, right? Like one is the parents and the family actually asking them, expecting it and requesting it of the adult child. And then there's also this learned desire, right? And also innate desire to want to help and want to give back. So then it becomes difficult when that distinction gets blurred and they don't know whether or not they're wanting to do it or they feel pressured to do it. And then that's when the resentment builds in. And then they think, well, if I have to do all these things to take care of my family, and then they burn out when they aren't noticing when they also need to, again, rotate themselves into the picture to take care of themselves and wait for some other ways they need to support their family. And then that can get them into this like repay cycle in a negative way.
So what is your one non-negotiable when you're working with your clients? Like one thing that has to be adopted or a new mindset? What is the one mind shift that you really want to see happen?
There's so many, but let's see. I think the most important thing that I think my clients need to have is self-compassion. So whenever we talk about anything, I ask them, well, like, why is it that we did this? Why did we react in this way? And that mindset of just that curiosity, questioning why this happened instead of like judging ourselves for it is super, super important. Because without that mindset shift and that reprogramming of like automatically jumping to conclusions of it being wrong, it's like, well, it happened for a reason. What was that reason? And how can we, like you were talking about, like give space for that and acknowledge that and like recognize what they're trying to do, but then like not let that be jumped to a negative conclusion about us. I
always say like, let's pause, reflect, and redirect, right? But you have to take that moment to be like, okay, aha moment. So, and one of the things that when you're working with your clients, what is one thing you wish they would stop normalizing?
I think that this suffering, feeling bad is normal because we're so like a lot of people are used to it, right? And especially as children of immigrant parents, they're used to the struggle. They're used to things being hard. They're used to having to be responsible and have all this weight and responsibility. So they're like, oh, this is normal. When really, like, could someone else help me with this? Could I actually say no to that? Right? Suffering is what I'm thinking of, but it's not always suffering. It's responsibility taking.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think that's so important. I think you actually nailed it. That is it. When I talk to women, my whole mission is like, hey, ladies, we can bathe, we can be anything, do everything. We desire being the key word. But that doesn't mean we have to do everything. And that's a really key element, right? Because just because we can doesn't mean we have to. Now you have a daughter. Are you parenting differently now? Are you thinking about it differently?
Oh, yes. I've put a lot of thought into this, and sometimes, so I talk a lot about boundaries in my program, in my therapy practice, and boy, does having a kid really make you think about your boundaries even more, right? So I've been really conscious of what I'm telling her, and it's hard too because I can't always catch everything I say because I'm also human, but I'm very, very mindful of trying to give her empowerment and decision making for her, giving her options and letting her choose so that gut feeling, that self-trust is really instilled in her, and it's for her, right? Like, I don't need her to make decisions for me. Mm-hmm. And she's 2, so she's not making decisions for me anyway, but I want that to be a pattern that continues within our journey together of just her being able to take care of herself and think for herself without having to think of she'll have to think of consequences and how it impacts people, but not for other people, if that makes sense.
Sometimes it's less, not to dismiss your degree, because I think obviously that's very important, but sometimes our unique life experiences is exactly what makes us qualified to do the things we do.
Yeah, and it's not always just about what we're teaching. It's kind of really like understanding how difficult it can be to practice something that we logically understand. Like, I knew about self-compassion forever, but it's hard. It's been a work in progress because of the emotions, the expectations. So like to what you're saying, it's how have I learned to deal with this so that I can understand how difficult it could be for someone else versus like, here's the tool, use it, and it should be so easy, right? Like, that's kind of what I'm hearing that you're speaking to, and that is so true because our emotions are very strong too, and we kind of have to give it space and allow it to do what it needs to get to that logic as well.
Yeah, that was thinking of, it made me think of one of my favorite therapists. I've always loved working with therapists. Is she once said, okay, Mick, you're attacking this from an intellectual standpoint when you're really dealing with someone who's very emotional. Like, those two do not connect well. So you really have to be able to identify, okay, when's the intellectual me? I could pop up. I know exactly when I'm talking to other women, when I can be like third party. But when you're in it, like when we are in it emotionally, it's hard to tell people. It's just like, oh, snap out of it. Just follow this and it's going to be okay. So that is where I see you add so much value. Like, okay, I've been there. I've done that. I feel you. You can empathize in a way that a lot of people couldn't. So I love that you decided to stay in this avenue and this channel. What are you hoping to do next? What's your thing?
I have a launch coming up for my Unshaken Gens program, and that's coming up. So I launch about 4 times a year. That's really top of mind for me right now. As I mentioned, my kid's going to daycare, so trying to also really sit with that and see her grow. Yeah, and I think just continuing to do this work and reach more people, because I really think the information I have and the tools that I want to teach in my coaching program can be beneficial to a lot of people, and it doesn't have to just be people who are like, struggling with relationships with just their parents, but it also branches out into relationships at work, friends, and things like that. But of course, my niche is second generation adults, so just excited to reach more people and help and see, because I like kind of like what you've been talking about. I don't like to teach things that I haven't done myself. I really think that we have to kind of go through what we're teaching to help actually truly help people and like see the benefits of it. And whether or not people do it or like find that tool as valuable as I did, that's totally fine. But it's just like knowing that this is something I've seen work either for me, for my clients, or, you know, just trusting that this is something I find in integrity with me to give out.
Now, as far as women, you're a young mom. What advice do you have for the ladies listening who are trying to do all the things that you're doing, to be everything, to, you know, be everything, do everything, as far as career, wife, daughter?
I'm going to piggyback on what you said, right? What is the desire? I think there's a lot of noise, a lot of expectations, a lot of information these days out here. So yes, but take it with a grain of salt and really decide, like, well, what do I want? What do I value? What's at the top of my priority list of values? And then really deciding, does this fit with me at this time, right? And really not making like this commitment to this thing like lifelong if we don't want it to be, right? If I want to focus on a business of season, right? A season of business, excuse me. And then like not knowing that like not making myself be committed to that intensity of work forever, right? Like maybe right now it's just a season and I really can, you know, like hold myself to that, but have the freedom to change your mind. Because as a mom too, and as a new parent or as a parent in general, there's going to be a lot of opinions about what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But it's, again, you're the decision maker, and really trusting yourself to make the decision that is good for you and your family and for yourself.
But oh my gosh, Allison, you're so delightful and so sweet and so kind. And I just find you to really have this way about you that makes me feel automatically very safe and very not judged and in very capable hands. So I'm very excited and proud of you. And I just wish you the best of success.
Thank you so much. And yeah, same to you. Like, you're very welcoming. I love the stories that you share. Like, I've listened to some of your other stuff, and I appreciate the candor and the vulnerability.
You got it. Well, I can't wait to continue to collaborate together and just like build each other up. That's what we're here for. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.